put any questions that you have into chat, and we'll manage them as we go along, and we'll have 10 or 15 minutes at the end to ask any additional questions. And I would like to start this evening by just saying thank you to all of you, because this Disciplined Agile toolkit has really enriched my life. It's enriched my team's life, and my team is pretty big. There are 1,200 software engineers at Siemens Digital Industries, and this toolkit that you provide by your patronage of PMI has really helped us all to do a better job. And at the end of the day, when you're in product development and software engineering, if you're doing a better job, you get to go home on time and spend some more time with the kiddies. So you get to have a better lifestyle. And your patronage and your support of PMI and your interest in project management helps us overall across the world bring products like this together. So it's extremely meaningful to me that you're interested and that you're here. And it's extremely interesting to me that, you know, PMI has been able to go out there and find all these disparate and different Agile things and put them together into one good toolkit. So I want to just go ahead and jump right in here. We talked a little bit about me, and, you know, here's my basic CV. I am a trainer. It's just a hobby of mine, but I do teach Scrum Master courses from time to time. My main job is Siemens Digital Industries, and we're a very big global team. We would be one of the top 10 software engineering companies in the world. And one good thing about working with software engineers during a global crisis and a pandemic is it was very easy for us to transition to working from home or working remotely. Much of the world is not so lucky, and we're very mindful of that, and we're very interested in, you know, trying to do our best to make everything better. Cincinnati is my PMI chapter. So Cincinnati is a mid-sized chapter. We're about 1,000 people, and we are probably getting towards being 40 years old. So we've been around for a long time. So chapters kind of grow incrementally. It grows based on, you know, what it can do for members and what members would wish to do for the chapter. So here's a few words on Disciplined Agile. What I would add to these words on the screen are, it's your product. It belongs to the members of PMI, like everything that PMI does. And Disciplined Agile itself is a toolkit. It's our Agile book of knowledge. It is our field manual. It is much like the PMBOK for those of you who have studied for the PMP, except it brings to life all of the different types of Agile that are in the world and puts all those choices in front of you. And when you think of PMI, you're probably thinking of an organization that's really restrictive and has lots of rules and lots of tasks and processes. And what's really, really interesting is PMI has embraced this notion that the people must decide how to do Agile. And it's one of the few toolkits or frameworks or methodologies that's out there in the world that says, pick from the best things that are available. Pick from what you actually might need to use. And in fact, this is very practical, because all of the Agile gurus and shamans that are out there that are selling their wizardly products, they don't really admit the fact that Scrum doesn't work the way they say it works. It works the way that the people are doing it want it to work. And so PMI has been very pragmatic, and it's a very good approach that's out there. So this is the Agile Book of Knowledge. So all of you that are PMI members that are listening can download this for free. Just go to pmi.org and you can find it and download it, and it's a nice PDF. And this Book of Knowledge, the first 80 pages talks about the methodology and the framework, and the next 350 pages talks about all the options that are out there and all the different ways to do things. And I'll get into this in depth. One thing that's important to say is Disciplined Agile does not say don't do SAFe or don't do Nexus or don't do Scrum of Scrums. In fact, all of these frameworks can be very good and they can jumpstart you. And at Siemens Digital Industries, I'm a SAFe practitioner, and a person that trains 13 different SAFe modules with our teams. So there's nothing wrong with these frameworks, but they only take you so far. They're good places to start. This toolkit will take you to places beyond just where it starts. So for true agility, we need, as project management practitioners, to understand all of the options. And this is very important. Project managers now, to really be out there in the market and to be marketable and to advance your career, you need to understand Agile, but not just one type of Agile. You need to understand all the Agile that you might tailor into your projects. And that's really where this book of knowledge comes in. And it's really quite a fantastic book. So I am so much of a project management nerd that I went out and brought this on Amazon so I could have it on my Kindle, so I could read it in different formats beyond just the Adobe PDF that we get for free as members. So I talked a little bit about why I think DA is special and why I think you are special for helping to bring this to the world. And I think this is one of the most important things, is the principles. The principles of Scrum, for example, are pretty straightforward. There's transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And what they say is, if you are transparent, if you inspect and adapt, your Scrum team will always do better, will always outperform teams that don't inspect and adapt. And this is just true. Principles are like gravity. If I drop my cell phone on the cement, it will break. This is what gravity does. I don't really have a choice in this. So the principles that DA recognizes are a little bit broader, and it's not meant just for a team, but these principles actually will go from one team to, in my case, 150 teams. It will take you through a career journey. If you're just starting out as a project manager and you want to run one team, it's all in here. It's fantastic. If you're jumping in and you have 50 teams or 20 teams to run, here are some ideas on how to run all of these teams. The first of these ideas is delight your customers. This is obviously a principle. If you don't delight your customers, they won't come back. The next principle is be awesome. And this is just saying that people don't want to be average. People want to master skills. Create ways for people to master their skills. Give them some autonomy to make decisions. Let them develop some mastery and define their purpose. The next thing is pragmatism. And PMI looks at this and says, don't try to do things that won't work. Let the people that are doing the work decide which of the Agile practices they should follow. Let's be pragmatic and only use the things that really fit. Context counts is one of the most important principles. And this is just saying, we want the people that are looking at the problem, the team that is right in front of the problem, to make decisions about how to solve the problem. This is fundamental to Agile, and this is fundamental to everyone's success. And I thank you so much for bringing this to the world and saying, we stand up for this. We stand up for people making choices. And there's a lot of people, and myself included, and I have to say, when we started our Scaled Agile Framework transformation at Siemens about 3 years ago, we went to all 130 teams and said, you're all going to do Scrum. And I'd say this was a tragedy, but it was actually a travesty, because about 6 teams should not have done Scrum. They didn't want to do Scrum. What they wanted to do is Kanban, a better form of Agile for them. So 6 teams turns out to be about 70 people. So these 70 people had really good reasons to be angry at me. I didn't allow them the choice of which type of Agile to do, and I should have. I should have been smart enough. I'm smarter now because those 70 people picked my little Honda Civic up and they carried it down to the Ohio River and they threw it in. No, I kid, but I'm just saying context is so important. So choice is good. Context counting is good. The other piece which we really have to recognize is the flow of value is the most important thing to a business. We must allow value to flow, and we must allow it to flow continually. So big staged gated processes that don't allow flow will not be successful in the modern competitive era. We need to deliver results continuously, and we need to inspect and adapt. Enterprise awareness, and this is where Disciplined Agile diverges a little from some of the other Agile methodologies. They say, let's be aware of an enterprise. We're not just one little island, one little team working in a conference room. We have a context of an entire company. Let's be aware of that context. And we want to organize around products and services. And so this supports flow, but this also supports the modern concept that not everything's a project. Some things are, which is fine, but most things are continuous. Most things have a life beyond their implementation. So let's think about that ongoing support. So these principles are key. The ones that just lit up in orange are the key ones for Scrum Masters to think about, and it's where 70% of the process tailoring occurs. So I talked a little bit earlier about the PMBOK, our Agile Book of Knowledge, which is a standard, an ANSI standard that gets updated every 4 years. Disciplined Agile now joins the party. So we have another ANSI standard, and PMI, by the way, supports several standards, and these standards all get supported by a million members who give feedback. But right now, Disciplined Agile joins the party, and its first birthday is coming up in August, so it's been around for a little bit. But if you think about Disciplined Agile, the number one thing is mindset. You know, let's think about the principles that we just talked about. The number two thing is people. Let's think about Agile roles and responsibilities. Let's think about how we design our teams. And let's be serious about this, and let's be choiceful. Let's have good intentions. The next thing is flow, and we can't overestimate the importance of flow. The last thing that a business sponsor wants to hear is, I'll show you that in 6 months. We need to be able to show incremental, real, meaningful process improvements and process delivery. And then practices. And this is probably where Disciplined Agile is the strongest of all the Agile platforms, because as we'll see pretty soon in this PowerPoint presentation, there are probably about 21 process goals. In those process goals, there are about 800 decision points. And we have possibilities in all of these decisions to improve any team and to take any team to the next level. And that is really where you all have helped me advance my career, and why I'd like to pay that back to you tonight by offering this brief presentation. Your patronage of PMI provided me with this great toolkit that I took into work, and everybody thinks I'm terribly, terribly bright. I'm not. I just had a wonderful toolkit to crack open and use. So Disciplined Agile thinks about a team leader. It thinks about a product owner, and this is somewhere where Scrum is very, very wrong. They've just got it entirely wrong. They think of the product owner as somebody that's outside of the team. And in Disciplined Agile, we say, no, they're actually part of the team. They're part of the Scrum team. The architecture owner is a unique role to Disciplined Agile. And this is somebody that's on the team who's a senior person, who understands the architecture, who understands the domain. In the United States military, they might call him a non-commissioned officer, but this is a person that really, really is a leader within the team itself, and has that expertise that everybody looks up to. And then how about this? Let's put our stakeholders in the picture. Let's put them in and say, you know, we have team members who are building the work. We have an architecture owner who's the first among equals, helping them understand, but let's include our stakeholders. And let's realize that, you know, they need to be happy. And let's always think about our stakeholders. So as I mentioned, Agile really took off in the mid-90s. It's been around at least since the late 80s, because that's when I started using it. And there's all different types. There's SAFe, there's DevOps, there's Scrum, there's XP, there's Crystal, there's DSDM. The list goes on and on and on. Disciplined Agile is agnostic, and Disciplined Agile takes into account all of these different types of Agile and all of the good practices that these different types of Agile bring. So it's incredibly powerful. primarily, we like to focus on Scrum and Kanban. And I think the marketplace is kind of bearing this out, that these are the two areas that people should focus on. So I would encourage everybody that's listening today, as you start to think about your Agile career, if you are, think about learning these two. And if you're an Agilist right now, you're probably nodding your head saying, yes, this is what I see mostly in the world. So when you're an Agile team, and in this case, we're looking at a Scrum team, Disciplined Agile has this concept of a process blade, and this is basically a container where all of your goals and your decision points and options reside. But you have to realize that you're not alone in this. There are lots of other areas in the organization that are tied in, and you can see there's finance, there's operations, there's strategy, marketing. Our marketing team is super, super important at Siemens because we can't release our product until marketing has figured out how to sell it. And what's the point of having a product out there if you can't sell it? So all of these folks need to be considered and brought together. So DA has this concept of process blades. So if you look at the very bottom, there are some foundational concepts, and you can see that Agile's in there, Lean is in there. And when we say Lean, in the DA context, we're talking about Kanban. Serial, so look at this, we're saying waterfall still has a home. And I can promise you there are waterfall projects out there in the world, and there should be. When it's very clear what you're doing and you can plan it out very carefully, why would you go to all the extra Scrum planning steps? Why wouldn't you just go forward? So DA takes all these into consideration foundationally, but if you move up the screen a little to see some of the Disciplined Agile possibilities, you see DAD, Disciplined Agile Delivery, and that's where you start to talk about your individual teams. Then you see security, data management. So each of these process blades going all the way up to the very top, enterprise architecture, human resources, asset management, transformation, finance, all of these groups have a process blade with goals and practices. So if you've worked on a project where they've said marketing's not part of a team, DA doesn't believe that. If you've worked on a group that says finance is not considered, DA doesn't believe that either. All the areas come together. If you want to go far, you need to go together. And DA really does believe this and hold this out. So it's just fantastic to see a group that's finally getting it from an enterprise scale as well as a team scale. So I've talked a little bit about these goal diagrams. Here's one for data management. So there's just a process blade out there, and there's a goal for data management. And there are some decision points in this goal. And one of the decision points is improving data quality. So you might be a project manager dealing with a data management team. You might not know much about data management. You might know that you have some data quality issues, however. And then if you look to the right, well, here are some options you can consider. And you can go to a meeting and say, well, let's consider some options. Here's a few things that are out there that are really good. Database refactoring, continuous database integration, test-driven database development, database regression testing. And if you go into the WOW, W-O-W, WOW book, you'll see that these things are covered. And there's a level below this in the WOW book where some of these things are explained, but you can see the arrow there on the right is saying this is really what we consider an ordered list. Database refactoring is the best thing. The things that are in bold are good places to start. So, this one is kind of interesting because it may not be so familiar. There are probably data management professionals who say, I recognize some of these things. But here's one that's probably more familiar to all the project managers that are on the call, exploring scope. And you don't hear people talk about this in most Agile methodologies. They just say, there's a backlog, and you prioritize the backlog, and you groom the backlog or refine it. But that's all they say. And so, how is it that you actually go and groom the backlog? And I have to say that, exploring the usage of the system was something I had a problem with recently. We have a backlog. It's pretty extensive. There are thousands of items in there. but it's difficult to figure out how to organize them. And if you go into the WOW book and you look at that, there's an option here called personas. And personas are probably very familiar to many people, but a persona essentially is a fictitious person that you invent. And you say, okay, I'm going to have engineer Ed for the Siemens digital software platform. And by the way, the Siemens Digital Industries platform is, picture a submarine is rotating on your screen, and you section through the submarine and you pull out a particular component and you drill down on that component. You look at the CAD drawings, you look at the analysis request, you look at the stress tests, you look at all the things that engineers use to build a device like a submarine. So I need a way to organize this. So I have a persona now. My persona is Engineer Ed. And Engineer Ed is one of the mechanical engineers working on submarines. And his picture hangs up all around the world where Siemens software engineers live. And those software engineers are building software for Engineer Ed. So personas are a very useful tool. And you can see that there's something that's on the list here for exploring usage. And if you go into the WOW book a little deeper, they'll say, it's a technique used to build empathy for users. Well, not to be too unkind to my colleagues, but engineers aren't known to be the most empathetic people in the world. So building up some empathy is a good thing. And if you go to the bottom of this list in the red box, you can see it says, but it can be used as an excuse not to work with actual people. So personas can be good, but they can also create a fake distance between you and your users. So when you go into the WOW book and these options that we're seeing, personas, epics, usage scenarios, there are more than 800 of these in this book. It will tell you things like this. What's the good about this possibility? What's the bad about this possibility? And if you're having trouble with it, you know, something like choosing a work item management strategy, there's nothing like, as the project manager, being able to go into your book of knowledge and look at the possibilities that other people have found useful and see a point of view on which one is the best possibility, and then go and look at the good and the bad about that possibility. And being informed at this level, you know, I just have to say thank you again for supporting PMI, because being informed at this level makes it look like I'm a genius. It makes it look like I work so hard. And I really don't work that hard to find this. I just know where to go in this book and crack it open and find things. So it's really, really just great to have this toolkit. And this is available to you if you're a PMI member today. And I mentioned earlier, my great sin when I started my SAFe transformation, my Scaled Agile Framework transformation, I forced everybody to do Agile, the process blade on the left, kind of right at 12 o'clock on the screen. But I had a lot of teams who would have been happier and better off, and they were even telling me, we want to do Lean, we want to do Kanban. So Disciplined Agile has taught me this principle that choice is good and people should choose how they should work. Now, Disciplined Agile has a point of view on which one of these is better, but Agile or Scrum is actually certainly part of it. And if you look, this is a typical Scrum type methodology, the Agile life cycle, but there are some differences. And they're so important and so useful. Well, first off, it's very familiar. It's iteration based, and you can see the typical Scrum loops right in the middle. However, it doesn't use Scrum terminology. Scrum terminology can sometimes be antagonistic or alienating to people. DA is agnostic. We're not really interested in promoting Scrum or not promoting Scrum. But here's where it gets a little different. On the far left, you can see it shows inputs from outside this life cycle of Scrum. And Scrum is really pretty silent on this in the Scrum guide. They don't really give you any information on how do I deal with getting the the work items into the backlog to begin with. And you can see there are 3 process blades full of goals and processes that are designed to help us, if we're in a very large enterprise, pull this information in. So there's a work item list, not a product backlog. And a work item list is more subtle. It's better refined, and it's also more pragmatic, because we know not everything in the backlog is created equal. There are some things that are time sensitive. They have to happen. There are some things we must expedite. So there's a more sophisticated concept. And then the other piece is it includes explicit milestones. And most Agile methodologies will immediately come out and say, milestones are no good. Don't use them. But there is a pragmatic reason to use milestones. And I'll just take you to one of these milestones, and we won't try to dig into every single one, but look at the prove architecture milestone. Can you actually build this? Well, wouldn't it be a good thing to figure that out before you start construction? And of course, you will figure that out. Is there an architecture that's available that's workable? But why not call this out? Why not have a great milestone for that? And so you can see that this concept of milestones has evolved. These milestones deal with real work. They deal with things that are tangible that people can see. And they also help to establish flow. So it's a different point of view. Here's the Kanban life cycle, and I've mentioned this several times. And this isn't a good venue to go into what is Kanban, but I would say that when you look at it, has a work item pool. Again, not all work items are created equal. Some of them have fixed delivery dates, and some of them have to be expedited. And at Siemens, we build life-critical software, and we invest business-critical dollars to build our platforms. And when you're in that type of environment and it's life-critical, sometimes you have an item that comes through that needs to go to the top of the stack. And everything needs to get out of the way so this thing can get done. So there are things that are expedited. Kanban supports continuous flow, and you can see there are still milestones. And we're still considering where does it come from on the far left, portfolio management, but also on the far right. How do we support this thing when it comes out? This is super important. And also, there are business teams out there, and I promise you, I have a marketing scrum team, and there are business teams that are up and running, and they need to have a way to use Agile as well. And the last piece that I, kind of bring up at the upper level is all of these blades tie together to run the entire organization at any scale that you want. So the people that wrote the WOW book, the DA body of knowledge, Scott Ambler and Mark Lyons, the chief scientists around that are internationally recognized, and they're now PMI staff members. DA Flex comes from Net Objectives, and the gentleman who is now a PMI employee working on this is named Al Shalloway. So he is working on this particular piece, which is how to run an entire portfolio. So again, just incredibly powerful stuff. But to come down from the portfolio and say, what does this mean to my individual Scrum Masters? What does this mean to somebody who's actually running a team? Well, you have a way to go forward and identify problems, identify solutions, look in your WOW book. But here's something. You're going to try some solutions. You're going to try some potential ways to fix things. Maybe they will fail. And that's okay in Agile. We're creating a safe fail environment. Not a problem at all. But wouldn't it be better to succeed sooner? Wouldn't it be better to have that book of knowledge, which you all sponsor, that tells us, try epics, try personas, try this, try that, but here's a list of things that have worked out there. And by the way, this book of knowledge has been built up over decades. It used to be an open source product from IBM that was acquired, and it's now been acquired by PMI. And if you look at it, it's just phenomenal, all the things that you can do. And you can go on and you can succeed more often, and you can have some experiences that are very different from a typical Agile team, because you'll always be armed with these 800 possibilities for your teams. And by the way, I've said several times, there's There are 800 options that are in this book. But think about how PMI works. There are 1 million members. There are 800 options, but our standards get updated every 4 years as part of the ANSI standard process. There will be many, many more options coming. This will only get stronger with all of your help. This slide shows a typical J pattern. When you implement something new where the X and Y axis are touching, things typically revert a little bit. Your productivity drops. So when I started my SAFe implementation at Siemens years ago, things went down a little bit. And then they started to come back up, and you can see the red line goes above the axis, and you start to get better and better. But then something happens with your frameworks, your LESS, your Nexus, your SAFe. They plateau. They sort of run out of steam and they run out of ideas. They don't have these 800 options that are in our book of knowledge. But you can see that, on these green lines with guided continuous improvement, you can be the one in your organization to step forward and say, I have some new ideas. I have some new things to try. I want to make us all better. Let's talk about these. Let's do some guided continuous improvement. Let's decide as a team some of the solutions to the problems we have. You can be that leader. It's fantastic. So I mentioned, Siemens Digital Industries is a full SAFe shop. So we have all the levels of SAFe. We have epics, capabilities, features, stories. We have 15 arts running presently with about 6 others that are tightly involved with us. And with all of that going on, and all of the different SAFe roles that I've taught, we needed more choices. So after 18 months, it started to become apparent that although SAFe is awesome, it just wasn't awesome enough. There was a lot more that we needed to do to continue and to, continue with our continuous improvement. So SAFe is great. I love it. Teach it all. But I did need more. Now, you could start an entire program with DA as well. And DA has, certainly got program level life cycles embedded within it. Very much like Nexus and SAFe and LESS and all the rest. But for my case, I needed more. I needed something to bolt on top of it. I needed more competencies and more choices. So I went forward and said, okay, where can I find these things? Where will I find different tools that will help me to elevate our game? We are a shop that does full continuous integration, continuous delivery. We do full life cycle testing. We needed full test plans. We needed full regression test plans. We needed the entire Agile test matrix, test-driven development, business-driven development, utilities testing, exploratory testing, where you say, I'm going to dive into this product with unique quality engineer skills and find problems. Risk-based testing. We've only changed these certain code modules and the 20 million lines of code that are the entire product. So based on that risk, let's do some manual testing in these specific areas. So most Agile methodologies, excuse me, are fairly quiet. They're fairly silent on what do we do to deal with quality. And DA is not. DA is quite vocal. It's one of the bigger areas with more process goals probably than almost any other, except for choosing your way of work. So it's just an incredibly powerful and useful thing. So I'm beginning to come into my final few slides here. And I'd just like to say, DA, and I could read this bullet point, but I think this bullet point is wrong because it should say DA is your rich, comprehensive, well-organized toolkit. It is the best organized toolkit, and it belongs to all of you, all of us, and it is your tool to use and make things happen. So it's just really quite fantastic that we have this. It's agnostic. It actually recommends using SAFe or LESS or Nexus. It's an enterprise approach, and it realizes that we're all on personal journeys to improve our careers, to become better at what we do, to develop some mastery. It also realizes that people have a fundamental right and a fundamental need to choose. We need some autonomy to get our jobs done. We see the problem in front of us better than anyone else. So our colleagues that are together in teams need to make those decisions. And, having that mastery and having that autonomy lets us come together and have a purpose to solve things bigger than just the software. So at Siemens, we deliver this life-critical, business dollar critical software. But that's really not what we do. We build the software that puts satellites in orbit above our heads that help us to understand the weather on our planet. We build the software that helps Brazilian shoe manufacturers create the shoes and products that we put on our children's feet. We help humanity. And Siemens has recently said, in the face of the COVID crisis, you know what? Probably the best thing to do is our software engineers to permanently start to work from home. So we all have a purpose, and we have some autonomy to achieve that purpose, and we have an ability to be masters of our craft. And with this toolkit that you've all provided the world, everyone in the world can develop that. And of course, understanding what your options are. I just can't say enough of how nice it is to have the options that are in the book right now, but also how much anticipation I have for all the options that are out there in the world that are yet to come. Because I've been with PMI for a long time. I've seen the PMBOK go through at least 5 revisions, and I'm giving away how old I am. I'm a gray-haired man from Kentucky, but I've seen the PMBOK do this, and so I know what will happen with this Disciplined Agile book of knowledge, and I'm just incredibly excited about that. So one question that people always ask is, well, how do I get involved with this? What is my glide path to understand Disciplined Agile? The best place to look is on the website with PMI, because Disciplined Agile is a fairly new acquisition, and it's coming into PMI, and things are changing very, very rapidly as we integrate and things become smoother. But I would say, there are 4 key courses. The first course is basically about Scrum, Foundations of Agile. How does Disciplined Agile support a team? And then the next course is, what if you're using Kanban? What if you don't want to be a Scrum team, but you already have a process and it's very defined? And then we get into Foundations of Disciplined Agile. So this is talking about how do we choose our way of working, and what is the philosophy behind Disciplined Agile to guided continuous improvement. So at the bottom of the 4 key course lists are 2 courses that you can take to become a Scrum Master. But if you don't have all of your Scrum Master experience yet, you would want to take all 4 or 3 out of the 4. And the website explains that better. The certifications are kind of listed on the left here. So there's the DA certification, and this is just joining the consortium, saying you're interested, becoming part of the party. CDA is the first test, and when you take that test, it's a pretty significant step in your career, challenging test. And once you've taken that test, the next thing that would happen is PMI would validate your references. So PMI is going out and contacting the references of everybody that applies for the next steps. And the next steps are you can become a Scrum Master or a Disciplined Agile professional. And either of these steps, they're equivalent in my mind. It just depends on your personal journey. But if you're leading Scrum teams, Disciplined Agile Lean Scrum Master is certainly for you. And I teach this one quite frequently, quite a few times coming up in the fourth quarter. The CDAP, is also the same course, but you may not be a Scrum Master. You may be management, leadership, and not intending to run Scrum teams, but wanting to, have your skills recognized. And so you can apply for either one of these. And there are other certifications that go on above these, but in general, people that are attending this introductory webinar are interested in this particular path in these 4 courses. So I offer this up with the caveat that I would send you to the PMI website and say, make sure you check the most recent updates from PMI, because things are a little bit fluid right now. And so, when you do that DA sign up, there's a free newsletter that's very important. And then you're probably tired of looking at my face, but there it is again. The best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I am pretty avid social media type person. I would invite you to connect, or invite me to connect, and I'd be happy to do that. I'm out on Facebook too, but so many people are bored with COVID. I just get hundreds and hundreds of invitations for Facebook, and I accept them all. So I'm not really sure who is who out on Facebook. It's a little easier on LinkedIn. So, but those are my 2 primary channels. So I think we're right at the mark where we should drop back and do some Q&A. So Flavius, if you would like to broker the Q&A, be happy to do that.
Yes, over to Kudzai to take the lead on the Q&A.
Outstanding, thank you.
All right, thank you everybody. Thanks Andy for the wonderful presentation. It was good following. So far I could just see one question which has been proffered. Can you hear me?
I can.